Welcome to the deep dive. Today our journey takes us into, well, the heart of central Turkey. We're looking into these hidden groves where a really rare plant, Ferula druidiana, is just barely hanging on. And we're exploring this really fascinating idea. Could this be the legendary Silphium? The plant that vanished from the ancient world.
It's an amazing story, really. Silphium was this huge enigma for centuries. It was so critical to ancient Cyrene. Its disappearance just left this massive gap, botanically and historically. Yeah. And now, finding these striking parallels, chemical, morphological, historical, between it and Ferula druidiana, it's tantalizing. It feels like maybe it survived, hidden away, only to face, well, another threat now.
Okay, chemical, morphological, and historical. That's quite a claim. Let's unpack that. So central Turkey. Tell us about this landscape and about Ferula druidiana itself. What makes it such a strong candidate?
Well, first off, the location is interesting. It's found in Anatolia, which isn't far from old Greek settlements. But it's more than just geography. Botanists started noticing this convergence of evidence. Its shape, the chemicals it makes, even descriptions in old texts seem to hint at a connection to Silphium.
Wow.
Yeah, it's almost like it was hiding in plain sight all this time, a secret tucked away in those Turkish hills.
So before we get deeper into Ferula druidiana, maybe remind us why Silphium was such a big deal back then. It aren't just, some common herb.
Oh, absolutely not. Far from it. Silphium was a real powerhouse. The ancients wrote about its medicinal uses, everything from a contraceptive to helping digestion. And it was a prized spice, too. But maybe the biggest thing was its economic impact. Cyrene basically built its wealth on the Silphium trade.
Really?
Yeah, it was so vital they stamped its image on their coins. It was like their, ancient corporate logo or economic symbol.
Right, those coins are famous. Okay, but let's pause the excitement for a second. Identifying Silphium isn't straightforward, is it? There was confusion, other plants involved.
Definitely. As the real Cyrenaican Silphium got rarer, people started using substitutes. Asafoetida was a common one, especially further east.
Right.
Some writers even specified Silphium of Battus to make it clear they meant the good stuff from Cyrene. And then, just to make things trickier, there's a completely unrelated North American plant group called Silphium. They also produce resins, which just added to the historical confusion.
So lots of potential mix-ups. And you brought up this idea of plant blindness earlier. How could that have sort of helped Silphium stay hidden for so long?
Well, plant blindness is this tendency we humans have to kind of overlook plants, to not really notice them as much as animals.
Right, they just become background.
Exactly. So it's entirely possible that Silphium, or maybe a surviving population like Ferula druidiana, just persisted without anyone really paying close attention scientifically. Because, well, our focus is often elsewhere. Maybe a legendary plant got missed because we weren't truly looking for it in the flora around us.
Yeah, that's quite a thought. But those Cyrene coins you mentioned, they do give us a picture, right? What did they suggest Silphium looked like?
They're our best visual clue, for sure. The images strongly point towards the Apiaceae family, that's the carrot and parsley family, also called Umbelliferae.
Okay.
And importantly, this family has lots of large plants that produce resins, like the giant fennels in the Ferula genus. And these Ferula plants look remarkably like the images on those coins.
So the search really zeroed in on the Ferula genus. Were there other contenders early on besides Ferula?
Oh, yes, a few. There was Ferula tingitana, which grows in modern Libya. It had traditional uses linked to women's health, which seemed relevant. And then Thapsia garganica. Now, that's a different genus, but it looks similar and has some really potent medicinal compounds, things researchers are even looking at for cancer treatments now.
Wow. Potent compounds. That fits the Silphium legend.
It does. And interestingly, Thapsia garganica is apparently quite tricky to grow from seed, which kind of echoes some hints in ancient texts about difficulties propagating Silphium.
Okay, so several possibilities. But what specifically drew attention to Ferula druidiana? Way over in Turkey.
It really came down to a specific researcher making the case. They pointed out how much Ferula druidiana's overall shape, its morphology, matched the pictures on those coins, and also that the oleogum resin it produces seemed very similar to how ancient writers described Silphium's resin. It was that combination, the look and the resin description, that really sparked the interest.
But you said botanists weren't immediately convinced. There was some pushback.
That's right. There was initial skepticism, partly because, well, Ferula druidiana doesn't look wildly different from many other Ferula species. To someone not deeply specialized, it might not immediately jump out as unique.
Okay.
Plus, lots of Ferula species produce a gum resin when you cut or injure them, so that alone wasn't necessarily proof.
So looking similar and having sticky sap wasn't enough. What was the evidence that really started to build the case for Ferula druidiana?
The real shift came with detailed chemical analysis. Scientists dug into Ferula druidiana's makeup and found this incredibly rich mix of biologically active compounds, secondary metabolites, things like spatholinol, presocalamendiol, umbelliferone, umbelliprenin, scopoletin. Quite a complex chemical cocktail.
Okay, that's a mouthful. Why are those specific chemicals important? How do they connect back to what people use silphium for?
This is where it gets really compelling. A lot of these compounds have known pharmacological effects that line up remarkably well with silphium's traditional uses.
Like what?
Well, for instance, some show potential for cardiovascular health, which fits some ancient descriptions. Others have properties that could explain why it had a reputation as an aphrodisiac. It's this amazing alignment of ancient claims and modern chemical findings.
Aphrodisiac, heart health.
Oh.
Yeah, that definitely rings a bell from the Silphium legends. Were there other chemical comparisons that stood out?
Yes, they also compared Ferula druidiana's chemistry to Acorus calamus, that's sweet flag, another plant with a long history of use. And interestingly, they share some beneficial compounds. But crucially, Ferula druidiana doesn't have the potentially harmful ocerones that are found in Acorus calamus.
Ah, so maybe a safer alternative.
Potentially, yes. It suggests Ferula druidiana might have offered similar benefits for certain uses, but without the safety concerns associated with sweet flag.
Okay, so the chemical profile's looking pretty strong. What about actual physical evidence from the past? Any archaeological finds that might point to Ferula druidiana?
Well, think about this. Umbelliferone, it's one of the main coumarins in Ferula druidiana, right?
Right.
It's actually been detected in bandages from ancient Egyptian mummies.
Really? Egyptian mummies?
Yes, and remember, Silphium was apparently used in some kind of Egyptian ritual for the renewal of the king's vigor. So finding this specific chemical marker, umbelliferone, in that context, it's suggestive, even if it's an indirect link.
That is fascinating. A chemical connection across cultures. Any other whispers from archaeology?
There is one more. Analysis of dental plaque from skeletons found in a Roman-era cemetery turned up a compound similar to shiobinol.
Shiobinol, okay.
Now, shiobinol itself isn't common in most Ferula plants, but Ferula druidiana happens to be packed with these things called elamine-type sesquiterpenoids.
Right.
And the thinking is these elamine compounds could potentially break down over time into something that looks like shiobinol. So the speculation, and it is speculation, is that finding this in dental plaque might indicate someone consumed a ferula, perhaps Silphium itself, or a medicine made from it, especially given Ferula druidiana's unique chemistry.
Wow. From coins to mummy wraps to Roman teeth. The clues are certainly adding up. But we know the original Tarnic and Silphium died out.
How does the story of Ferula druidiana's survival or its current situation relate to that?
Well, the historical accounts suggest Silphium's decline in North Africa was linked to basically overgrazing and unsustainable harvesting. Farmers seem to value their livestock grazing more than protecting the plant.
And disturbingly, we see the same vulnerability with Ferula druidiana today. The few populations that exist are threatened by grazing animals. People have actually seen livestock eating it. It's a really sad echo of the past.
History repeating itself in the Turkish pastures. So is anyone trying to protect this potential rediscovery? What conservation is happening?
Thankfully, yes. Efforts are underway. They've collected Ferula druidiana seeds, and researchers figured out how to get them to germinate using cold stratification, basically, chilling the seeds to mimic winter.
Okay, good.
And they've started reintroducing seedlings and small plants back into the wild in Cappadocia, working with local villagers, which is great.
That sounds promising.
Yeah.
Any setbacks with the reintroduction?
There were some initial difficulties. The really young seedlings didn't take well, but they found that slightly older 2-year-old saplings had a much better chance of surviving once planted out.
Oh, okay.
Another key thing is the plant's biology. Ferula druidiana seems to be monocarpic. It flowers and sets seed only once in its life, and then it dies. And it's slow growing too, and it might take 9 or 10 years just to get to that flowering stage.
Wow, 10 years for one-shot reproduction.
Exactly. Which, interestingly, also aligns with some things the ancient writer Theophrastus said about Silphium, like its stalk only lasting a year and the leaves turning gold in late summer. The life cycle seems to match up in some ways.
That slow, single-shot reproduction makes it incredibly vulnerable, doesn't it? And you mentioned a new threat.
Yes, and this is the really concerning part. It's almost exactly what seems to have happened to the original Silphium. Because of recent publications talking about Ferula druidiana's potential as an aphrodisiac or for treating erectile dysfunction,
Oh, no.
there's suddenly this new demand, this pressure for exploitation. It's driven by the very same kind of allure that made Silphium so valuable and ultimately led to its demise in Cyrene. We've seen another Turkish Ferula species decline rapidly because of similar pressures.
That's just a terrible irony.
Yeah.
We might finally find this legendary plant, only to push it towards extinction ourselves again. What needs to be done?
It needs urgent action, seriously. Because it grows so slowly and only fruits once, any unchecked harvesting could wipe it out incredibly quickly. It really requires collaboration, conservation groups, scientists, maybe even biotech companies, all working together to protect Ferula druidiana.
So we've journeyed from ancient history and legend to these remote Turkish hills. We've looked at the lost Silphium and this compelling candidate, Ferula druidiana, the echoes on the coins, the matching chemical profiles, the historical uses, and now even these grim parallels and the threats it faces.
Exactly. It's a powerful web of evidence. Now, absolute proof would mean directly comparing it to, say, an archaeological sample of actual Silphium, which we don't have yet. But the picture painted by all these connections is, well, it's incredibly persuasive.
It really is. And it leaves you thinking about this tightrope we walk, doesn't it? Between the excitement of rediscovering ancient knowledge and the huge responsibility we have to protect the rare living things that hold these secrets. How does our own desire for that historical connection impact the very real need to make sure a plant like Ferula druidiana survives this time? Something crucial to consider as we wrap up this deep dive. Thank you for taking us on this incredible journey.